No doubt, one of the biggest fears for a parent is when their child goes missing. Maybe they get abducted or disappear without a trace. But for one mother in France, this fear would become a roller coaster of a nightmare that would end with a twist that no one could have predicted, and even after 100 years later, still leave many dumbfounded. Please join me as we look at the odd and perplexing case of La Petite Pauline Picard. Guas-Aludu is a small rural farming settlement in France. Francois Picard and his wife would live there and have 9 children. It was hard work for the Picards, protecting livestock from predators that trolled around, the terrain and brutal weather taking its toll. But they powered through it all with the help of each other. Their mother never worried about the kids as they ran around and played outside. The older kids looked after the younger ones, or she could simply look out the window and watch them frolic without a care in the world. This would work out for a while before the events of April 6th, 1922. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, 3 of the girls would set out to play on a nearby hill. Their father watched from the barn as they went off. Later, as the sun began to set, their mother would call the children for dinner, all of them coming except for the second youngest of the children, 2-year-old Pauline. Panicked, she would get Francois, who contacted the police, and together with the people from the village and hunting dogs would work to find the young girl. But she seemed to have vanished, with no trace of her anywhere. The police would have one suspect during this time, a Monsieur Kerman. He was in his 50s, thick mustache, and walked with a limp. He had served time for a violent crime and had recently been released and finding work on the Picard's farm. According to some witness accounts, he seemed interested in Pauline, and on a few occasions gave her candy, but was no longer in the area. A month later, he was tracked down and asked about where he had been during her abduction. To tell them he was working 4 miles away at the time. This would be confirmed by his employer and eliminated as a suspect. A rumor soon spread that young Pauline may have been taken by a band of gypsies, but this was later debunked when none were present in the area at the time. Days would turn into weeks, and the Picard family would start to lose hope that Pauline would ever be found. But these inklings were soon banished when the police arrived at the farm, telling them that in the Normandy city of Cherbourg, Pauline had been found alive, wandering the streets in a confused and dazed state. They would be shown a picture that had been taken of the child, and the Picard parents confirmed it was her. Elated, they traveled to Cherbourg to get their daughter. However, when they arrived, that's when the shades of doubt began to manifest. They anxiously waited as they went to get her, both no doubt jubilant and relieved that their daughter would be in their arms again after being gone. Their jovial mood would quickly turn to confusion at the child they were presented with. This girl was thinner and wearing different clothes than those she had been wearing when she disappeared. The girl was silent when she was told that the people before her were her parents. No glee or excitement when she saw them, seemingly having no memory of them and didn't understand what was being spoken to her. Police would clear these concerns when they asked. She was thinner because she lost weight while she was gone. and concluded that she didn't remember them or the language because she was suffering from amnesia. While the Picards tried to get more information, like how did she manage to travel 400 kilometers from Gos Aludu to Shabor, and what of the clothes she was wearing? Ultimately, they were brushed off and sent home, never receiving an answer to these questions. They returned home with the girl. Once there, she seemed to settle in quite well, talking the same language and remembering things around the house. Pauline's siblings recognized her, happy to see her back and in relatively good health. Her parents were relieved. Her bout of amnesia was over, and they could return to their normal routine again. Even seeing her eyes were the right color and the same shape as they remember she had. The following event has been a point of debate. Whether it has happened or not is still up in the air, and I ask my viewers to take it with a grain of salt. A neighbor, a man named Yves Matin, came over to the house, having heard the news that Pauline had returned alive. Her mother called to her daughter, who appeared before Matin. He jumped, his eyes widened, and shouted, "God help me, I am guilty," before running out of the house. After this incident, it is said he was committed to an asylum. No doubt a foreboding sign of things yet to come. May 26th, Monsieur le Maire was taking a morning bike ride on the road near the Picard's farm when an article of clothing had caught his attention. Getting off his bike, he went over to the clothes when he realized there was a body still in them. The body was that of a child and severely decomposed. Its head, arms, and legs were missing. Next to the body sat a neatly folded set of clothes. When the clothes were shown to the Picard parents, they confirmed that Pauline was wearing them when she disappeared. An autopsy performed on the body would later determine that it belonged to Pauline. Several cuts, believed to be from a knife, were found on her body, with an incision under her rib cage and in her groin as well. Her death was ruled an accident, and it was theorized that she had got lost during a rainstorm. After she died, presumably of exposure or starvation, wild animals had caused post-mortem cuts. Villagers were outraged by this. Surely those searching would have seen her body laying there if it was in the open, or the hunting dogs would have picked up her scent. Even the New York Times would question this, stating, "So careful was the search made at the time of Pauline's disappearance that the body would have been discovered had it been laying there where it was found. Everything now points to the theory that it was placed there, together with neatly folded clothes, quite recently." The most startling discovery of all, however, is that the unrecognizable head found close to the child's body is not the skull of a small child, but of a grown man, thus introducing a second victim of an unknown murderer. Found along with her body was a skull, perfectly cleaned of its flesh. It was determined that it was an adult skull of a male, but no body was found. The Picards held a funeral for their daughter, buying a gravestone with her name prominently displayed on it. And the girl that the police had been so adamant being Pauline, the girl the Picards thought was their long-lost daughter, was sent to an orphanage. Sadly, however, only a few short months later, she would contract measles and pass away. Her true identity remains a mystery. Who took Pauline Picard? And for what reason? There was no ransom note sent to them, no demands. What was the end game? And what about the girl who was found in Cherbourg? And why did the police heavily push the Picards to believing that she was their daughter? Why did Yves Matin act so strangely? Was he responsible for what happened to Pauline? And what about the other victim with Pauline's body? Who was he and why was his head placed with her? It has been 100 years since Pauline Picard's death, and not very probable that this mystery will be solved. It's sad to think that the parents of this young girl never really knew what happened to her. But maybe they were better off never knowing the truth. And we're just happy with the closure that she was found and they were able to give her a proper burial. I think this is a good lesson for all parents out there. As much as we'd like to think our children are safe, given how the world is today, 100 years later, you should never think they are. The only time they will ever truly be safe is wrapped in your arms as you hold them tight.
I hope you will join me next time for another episode. And remember to look around the corner, because you never know what's lurking in the darkness.